we're holding pretty steady here. Go ahead and get started. I know today's going to be a little bit of a somewhat longer one. So, okay. Well, while you all are still, feel free to continue to introduce yourselves to each other. Just a couple of quick housekeeping type things today. This is a brief look at our agenda. Today, we are very excited to have Amanda Cantaras with us. She will be presenting on finding stability, navigating cravings in the midst of psychosis. And Lorna will share more when we get to Amanda about Amanda's background. Just a note that our next meeting is next month. So because we didn't do our April meeting, we've got 2 months in a row. So Monday, June 1st, same time, same place. And we're very excited to have Jacob Schoenberg and Jacob Hackman and potentially a couple of other panelists who will be focusing on the role of peers within ACT teams. We affectionately refer to them as the Jacobs. So anyway, you'll be hearing more about them, and we'll be sharing the topic more specifically as we get a little bit closer. Just a note, Amanda has a lot to share today, and so we have decided to opt to not do the open mic today. For those of you who are just joining us, we usually spend a little time with team members, trying to just kind of ask questions and get answers from other team members, compare notes, often, on screen so that we can actually see one another a little bit more. But we're not going to do that today, but we promise that we will do it next month, and we will reserve the full 30 minutes to do that. Just a quick note, Lorna and I still haven't gotten that new combined website together just yet, but we're working on it. In the meantime, just as a temporary fix, we've got everything, all of our past National ACT calls are on the University of Washington Spirit Center website, and you'll just go down to resources. You'll see the link at the top there. And the other thing, the exciting thing to share is that even though we were told that our ACT 101 intro e-primer was going to be taken off Healthy Knowledge, apparently it is still there. So if you want to continue to look at it or send teams their way, it's about 3 hours, and it's basically just an overview of ACT. It's not to replace startup training or anything like that, but I think it just provides a nice overview. And just remember, when you get to the website, just to type in assertive community treatment, not just ACT, because it doesn't recognize that for some reason. And then just a note today, Zoom chat versus Q&A. So we use the chat for comments. If you just want to, say something, or get in touch with us, you can send something directly to the panelists if there's something, you're having trouble with or have a question for us. So just put that in the chat. But then if you have a question for Amanda today or for any of us, and you want an answer to it, it's important to use the Q&A. And that way it tracks kind of who's asking questions and where we're at in our answers. So note about that. And quick intros of us. Many of you already know us, but I'm Maria Monroe DeVita. I'm at the University of Washington Spirit Center, and I'm a co-author of the TMACT Fidelity Tool. You can see more about me here along with Lorna. And most of my focus is on Washington State. We support 22 what we call PAC teams in Washington, and I also provide training in ACT across the country. Lorna.
Yes. So we got to start switching these. You always go first and I just get to mail it
Yeah,
in.
and then you say ditto, right?
Kind of like what she just said, but more for North Carolina. And I have my crew of 14 or so consultants and trainers. I see a couple of them here, like Chris and Stacy. And yeah, we get to beat you all. Your population is probably smaller, but we have 85 ACT teams here in North Carolina. And
Oh, wow.
like you, we have the pleasure of also providing some support to neighboring states in particular. So great to be back with you all and look forward to today's talk with Amanda and getting to see you again in just a month.
Yes, that's awesome. All right. So with that, we're
So
going to
with
switch
that,
over
yeah,
to Amanda.
Amanda wants to get her slides up. So Amanda's joining us, our friends over at the Center for Excellence in Behavioral or Evidence Center for Evidence-Based Practices at Case Western. They provide a lot of technical assistance and training across ACT and IDDT and first episode and tons around co-occurring substance use and overall integrated health. And Amanda has been with them for a couple of years and comes from the background of being a team lead for first episode program and a lot of experience working with those with co-occurring disorders and helping around various harm reduction practices. So Amanda's joining us to talk about navigating things around folks who have psychosis and substance use and experiences they may have, particularly around cravings. We keep trying to respond to your need to want more practical information and knowledge, and we keep trying to bring it to you. So, welcome, Amanda.
Thank you, Lorna. Thanks, Maria. I am so excited to be here, everybody. Good afternoon. Like Lorna said, my name is Amanda Cantaris. I've been a licensed professional clinical counselor supervisor for, maybe 16, 17 years now. I had the pleasure of being a director of behavioral health at an agency in which we started up an ACT team. So I was kind of there right in the beginning of it. Loved everything that I saw. I think it's just such an important evidence-based model. So I am excited to present this to you because I put this training together thinking, are cravings really different for folks who are experiencing psychosis? And long story short, yes, they are quite different. So let's go ahead and get started because I have a lot to talk about today. I'm going to get us started off with this big chunk of chocolate cake. I want you to take a look at this chocolate cake and I want you to notice what you are feeling, what you're experiencing. Is your mouth watering a little bit? Are some of you like, oh, I wish I had that here to just chomp on? Whether it's your lunchtime, maybe it's your dessert after dinner. Just notice what you feel. Maybe there's thoughts going through your mind, like, oh, that would be great to have right now. I'm at my afternoon chocolate time where I need my sweets. Or, maybe some of you are like, I can't have chocolate or I'm on a diet. But essentially this, yeah, where's the ice cream, right? I have to have ice cream because I do a little bit of ice cream and then a little bit of cake. So I am right there with you, Michelle. So if any of you had your mouth watering, you wanted this really was something that looked delicious. This is a craving. Cravings are a normal part of the human experience. Sometimes I show a big kind of fat, cheesy cheeseburger, but that's not for everybody. So went with chocolate cake this time, but it's a subjective experience, a craving. It can be described as a state of desire or wanting. So you're wanting of that cake when you saw it. Because why? You remember how good something like that tastes. You remember, how well, it felt, as you took a bite. Our DSM, our Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, defines a craving as an unwanted, persistent, and intense desire to use despite negative consequences. So when we're talking about folks with substance use disorders, it is persistent, it is unwanted, and it's intense despite knowing the negative consequences that come from use. Cravings are characterized by a mixture of thoughts, so cognitions, affect, how I feel emotionally, and physiological arousal, which is provoked by those conditioned cues. So let's take a look. Let's dissect a craving. What is a craving made of? There's a cognitive piece to a craving. So the thoughts that go through your head when you are triggered. I need that substance to survive. I'm only social when I get high. How many of us have heard that? Or this is going to feel so good, that anticipatory thoughts going through your head. We also have affect, when we are triggered. So it might be you feel euphoria because you know what's about to happen. It might be some anxiety, some anticipation, might be excitement that you feel knowing that you're going to use. And physically, our bodies respond especially to cravings and cues. So your heart might race, your palms might be sweaty. And oftentimes, simply being triggered by something, your body begins to respond as though it already has the substance within you. So you may begin to feel the same effect as if you were to use substances. Now, not going to dive too deep into Psychology 101, but many of you are familiar with Pavlov's dog and the mouth watering. When he began to pair the bell with food, all of a sudden you take the food out of the equation, the bell produces the salivation because the dog associates that. And this is classical conditioning. This is what is happening when cravings develop in folks. Something that otherwise has really no response, maybe no value, becomes associated in the brain with the effects of that substance. And it tells me, hey, every time I go by this bar, I remember what it's like to have that drink, to feel social, to interact with folks. The brain remembers that association. So this is a very kind of simple example of how this plays out. Let's say I use my credit card to cut lines of cocaine. Now, all of a sudden, I'm in the grocery store, time to pay. I pull out my credit card. All of a sudden, I start to feel clammy. My heart's racing. Biology then at that point takes over. My brain is telling my body, you need to use, nothing else matters. It is crucial to your survival. This is just one very simple example, and I'm sure all of you have experiences in working with your clients, your consumers, who also are triggered by certain things. And we'll talk in a moment about how sometimes we don't even know why we're triggered. So we always hear people, places, things, right? And there is accuracy to that, but I want us to think beyond simply people, places, things, because cravings can be triggered by internal states, feeling anxiety first, and then being triggered, feeling sadness. For a lot of folks, feeling happy is a trigger. Like, hey, things are going really well. I feel really good. Let's celebrate. I want to use memories, especially folks who have been through trauma. Memories or even awareness or the recalling of a memory can be a trigger for folks. And then physical sensations. So even before I encountered that trigger, physically, I may experience something like pain. I may have pain somewhere in my body. I may even just have a headache. And that triggers my desire to use because I remember in the past when I had those kinds of feelings, I used. And so even our own bodies, physical bodies, and our sensations can be triggers or cues for us. So when we think about this in terms of folks with severe mental health disorders, while that experience of a craving, so the cognitive aspect of it, the affective and the cognitive piece of a craving, it is the same. It's the same for folks who have severe mental health conditions. However, what may vary, and often does vary, is the cues or the triggers for folks experiencing psychosis. So, for example, cravings for folks in the midst of psychosis may be driven by their symptoms themselves. That's so it's psychosis. It could be driven by mood. It could be driven by cognitive impairments, or cravings may be driven by the effects of medication for folks who are experiencing psychosis. So, for example, the craving often isn't, I want to feel good. I want to feel like I felt when I had that substance. Instead, for folks in the midst of psychosis, it may be something like, I need this to make the voices stop, or I won't be safe without this substance, or even this helps me understand what is happening around me. So let's dive in to really taking a look, the connection between psychosis and cravings. And I want to launch a quick poll. It's very simple. I'd like you all to take a couple seconds and rate your confidence in helping those who are experiencing psychosis, who also have cravings to use substances. So, how confident do you feel right now that you could help somebody who's experiencing psychosis and also has a craving to use substances? Looks like half have completed it. I'll give it a few more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll in 3, 2, 1. So let's see the results. Let's see how we're doing. How confident do we feel to help folks who are experiencing psychosis and cravings? So let's see here. So the majority, well, we're kind of split really. 21% of us say, like, in the middle, maybe I do, but there's still some things that I could probably improve upon. Some of you are 6s and 7s. We have 8 of you who are at a 9. 2 of you are at a 10. 2 of you feel very confident that you're able to do this. And then we have, looks like, a few folks are in that 1, 2, 3, kind of 4 category. So as we go through today, kind of think about, have I experienced this with my client? And what did I do to help them if they were going through this? So these are some common ways that symptoms of psychosis can be triggers or cues for folks to want to use substances. The first of which is very common in that substance use is used to relieve symptoms. And you may hear your clients say, well, cannabis or weed is the only thing that quiets the voices. Or, alcohol makes me forget the people that are watching me, through the television. And so substances help to relieve symptoms. And when folks say that, we really need to listen. Some of us hear that and we're like, oh, they're just, talking again about using, and that's just an excuse. Some of the things we typically, think about when we hear folks justifying or explaining their use. For folks experiencing psychosis, this is real for them. So it is important to listen to them. Delusions may drive substance use. So, for example, your client says, they tell me this is part of my mission to use methamphetamine to become invincible, to save the world. So this can be a little tricky when the substance use is driven by a person's belief system, and a belief system that is not rooted in reality necessarily. And so usually we take a look at the person that's ambivalent, but if substance use is tied to psychosis, the person's not necessarily ambivalent in the way that we usually talk about folks who are in that contemplation stage of change, because this person's ambivalence is rooted in delusion, something that possibly is not real. So in them, their reason for using makes sense within their belief system. So before we talk about any kind of change behaviors, we have to first understand their belief system and the perspective, the lens through which they are seeing their substance use. Paranoia. paranoia increasing cravings. So you may hear your client say something like, Xanax helps me forget, if only for a little bit, that those people are watching me and plotting my death. And with paranoia, the things that we have to keep in mind, if it's driving cravings, this could happen in crowded places. This could happen in shelters, noisy environments, just when there's too many people, too many unpredictable interactions that could happen. Folks become overloaded oftentimes with noise, movement, lights. And so think if you constantly felt terrified. Think if you constantly believed someone was out to kill you or your family. Imagine that distress that you would feel. And then you're handed something that all of a sudden just makes you calm down, helps you relax, helps you maybe get some things done that otherwise you're not able to do because you're so frozen in that fear or that distress. Command hallucinations, we know these can be quite scary. These can be quite dangerous. They could also be related to substance use. So if your client is saying something like, he said, or they said, that if I don't do 5 shots of liquor every day, somebody in my family will die. So it's not command in the sense of hurt yourself, hurt others, but it's command in the sense of you need to use or else, or XYZ will happen. And when we hear this, we may initially, again, jump to conclusions and think, well, this person has really poor insight, or they're resistant, they don't want to work on their substance use. But we need to take a step back and again, see it through their lens, their perspective, see how they explain their substance use. And that can give us a lot of insight into, oh, this is a command hallucination going on here. Impaired reality testing around consequences also can be a very dangerous, vulnerable experience to have for folks. Someone's believes that fentanyl can't harm me like it does those other people because I'm immune. So there's some kind of impaired understanding around the consequences of use. And usually that's part of the psychoeducation we do. Otherwise, here's what could happen, here's the health effects, the side effects. But for this individual, I'm going to tune you out. I don't even know why you're telling me all these things because I'm immune, I'm invincible. Those kinds of things don't happen to me like it's happening to other people. And so the risks don't quite stick the same as they would with somebody who's not experiencing psychosis. Because those without psychosis may be able to think, well, I want to use, but I know I shouldn't. For folks experiencing this impaired reality testing around consequences, it's more like, I should use, that's what makes sense right now. And then you all are probably familiar with those negative symptoms of schizophrenia, folks who are experiencing anhedonia, emotional blunting, just, I don't feel anything. So for them, hey, substance use now makes me feel alive. It makes me feel something for once because for so long, especially after a depressive episode, especially or during a depressive episode, I'm sorry, or post-psychotic states, you may have folks feeling this kind of this negative affect, this lack of pleasure, lack of motivation, and all of a sudden I'm introduced to a substance and oh, I feel alive. I feel like a person again. So that can also be driving substance use for folks. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of making this connection, how is psychosis related to substance use, is this cognitive disorganization that we often see with folks with conditions like schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, even bipolar disorder. There is this just scatteredness going on for the individual due to the nature of those diagnoses that I have difficulty tracking time, I'm forgetting appointments. It's really hard for me to even set goals and take action. Or I have difficulty, implementing coping skills just because of me just being so disorganized cognitively. So for folks experiencing that, when urges come on, they may completely throw that person for a loop because the urges feel sudden, they feel overwhelming, and are very hard to interrupt. So imagine feeling confused, scattered, forgetful, and then superimpose a craving to use substances on top of that. Think to yourselves, how many of you have had a client tell you, methamphetamine helps me stay organized? It helps me stay alert. It helps me stay on top of things. And they are insistent that that almost evens them out, mellows them out so that they can be organized. So we may see the opposite of this as well. Substance use may be a way for people to feel more organized when otherwise they just feel very, very forgetful, very confused. So let's shift then. How do we talk to people about their experiences? How do we find out kind of what is behind a person's craving to use substances? And this is framed very much in a motivational interviewing way. You'll notice a lot of the spirit of motivational interviewing in these questions. And the way that we can do this, it kind of falls nicely into this earnest framework. And we're going to go into each of these in a little bit more detail. Our E for earnest is enter their experience without arguing reality. We all know you don't ever want to tell somebody that their experience is not real. So we still want to, again, enter into how is this person seeing their use. So for example, we want to reflect meaning, not necessarily validating the delusions. We can validate their emotions. So we might say something like, well, the substance helps you feel safer when things get overwhelming. That's me understanding more, becoming more closely in alignment with understanding that person's use. Or for you, using makes a lot of sense right now. So we're reflecting their reality, we're entering their experience. Our A is assess function. This one is important. All of them are important, but I think this one especially is for the folks that you're all working with. We're taking a shift with assessing function from the typical questions we ask of people, especially during an assessment. What do you use? How much do you use? When was the last time you used? How do you use? All of those questions, we're kind of shifting from that to more so, well, what does using do for you? So what is the function of use for you? So we may ask our clients, what does using help with when symptoms flare up? What happens right before the urge shows up? So we're helping people take a look at how is your use connected to your symptoms? What does it do for your symptoms? And we'll see where this pops up a little bit more later on. So remembering our acronym of earnest, we enter the R part of earnest, and that is reality checking. Reality checking gently and collaboratively. So would it be okay if I shared another way that some people experience this? Some people notice substances calm things short term, but make the voices louder later. How does that fit for you? So for example, you may share with your clients that other people who are experiencing anxiety or panic attacks or paranoia feel as though they are being electrocuted or bugs are crawling on their skin. How does that fit for your situation? So we're kind of, in a roundabout way connecting that sometimes physical symptoms, mental health symptoms can appear as though something is happening to us, that we're being electrocuted, or when I'm anxious, it may feel like bugs are crawling on their skin. Hopefully, to just kind of raise awareness and some insight. You may also share that, for a lot of my other clients, stress really increases symptoms. And that would happen for anybody, almost normalizing it too, which actually is the N in earnest, normalizing ambivalence without requiring insight. And that's one of the distinguishing factors when working with folks experiencing psychosis that is different from working with someone that is not, in that insight is impaired. So we may, with this individual, to normalize their ambivalence, part of you feels you need it to stay safe. And another part is tired of what happens after. Good old double-sided reflection, making sure we're ending on kind of the change aspect of it. Using helps in the moment. And it also creates problems you don't want. So again, we're highlighting the ambivalence, but we're not requiring the person to quite have the insight maybe that they may need to explore that ambivalence a bit more. But we are reflecting it back to them. All right, our second E in earnest, explore safer alternatives that meet the same need. Remember, assessing function. What does the substance do for this individual? This is tied to that. If they're using a substance, for example, to quiet voices, we may then help them with some grounding techniques. If they do have PRN meds, for example, like for anxiety, can we use some sensory tools for them to help, again, with that same function that the substance does for them in a safer way? If they're using to reduce paranoia, can they identify a trusted person to check in with? Can we somehow adapt and change the environment for this individual to be less stimulating for them? And then if the substance is used to feel something, remember that anhedonia and emotional blunting triggering substance use. Helping the person with sensory input, so the person that feels blah, that feels nothing, helping them to maybe move, exercise, dancing, music, just some kind of other five sense sensory input for them to feel things, but in a different way without using substances. So the conversation with this individual might be something like, if the goal is relief, can we test something that's lower risk? So if the person usually turns to fentanyl to quiet those voices, to calm down, we all know fentanyl, one use of it could kill an individual. So how about we try, can I walk you through a grounding technique? Can I walk you through a safe space imagery? Can we try something? And asking permission, of course, is always important because they can say no. They say, no, I don't want to hear what you have to say. So give them that option. Our S in our earnest framework supports small, symptom-informed goals. In some traditional substance use programs, abstinence is always initially ongoing the goal. You all know folks that are experiencing severe and persistent mental illness. For them, abstinence may not be in their foreseeable future. So this is related a bit to harm reduction in that we're going to focus with that person on safety, distress tolerance, or even delaying use, not abstinence by the default that we sometimes see in some other traditional programming. So for example, we may work with that individual. When you feel that craving, that trigger, cue, can you hold off for 5 minutes? Can you delay your use? Even by 30 seconds could make a difference for that individual. using substances with less risk, and using with more structure or support. What that means is teaching your clients about those hotlines like Never Use Alone, or Safe Spot is another one of the hotlines you can call. You are connected to someone on the other line, usually somebody with lived or living experience, and you come up with a safety plan. And if the client is non-responsive after 10, 15 minutes of using, their emergency plan is put into place. A lot of folks are using alone, unfortunately. I do another training on harm reduction, and a large proportion of folks were found using alone. And so it is important that we let folks know what are some resources for them. Can they call somebody before they use? At least somebody else knows that they were using, and to check on that person. All right. Our T in our earnest framework is to track patterns together. Collaboratively with your client, note those links between symptoms, cravings, and the outcome. You can use a functional analysis form if you're familiar with that or you have access to that, to do it together with your client, or you can just track patterns informally through discussions, like asking, what do you notice about the voices after using versus not? When are urges strongest during the day? So what we're trying to help them see is that there's a pattern to their use, that every time they start to feel like they're being watched, they then use their substance, they go into their room alone and they use. Or, hey, I noticed that every time you're with Amanda, you end up using after the fact. So tracking those patterns together. So once we've had conversations with folks and we're better able to assess what's behind their use, we then have to do something about it. Here's the practical hands-on. I know that Lorna was saying that many of you are looking for. So these are actual interventions then that we can use with our clients if they're experiencing cravings. They fall into these three categories. Relaxation techniques, and you'll notice there's an asterisk by a couple of these. Guided imagery. So you want to first make sure you're well versed in doing guided imagery techniques. Essentially, this is where you lead someone through imagining somewhere they feel safe, somewhere they feel calm, and you walk them through experiencing all five senses. Pay attention though, if you're going to use this, pay attention to how the client is responding, because this could be triggering for the individual. If you're guiding them through a space where, they have those associated cues, for some individuals, relaxation, mindfulness can almost have an opposite effect. So it's really important to know your client. It's really important to pay attention to not only the verbal, but the physical cues that you're seeing from your client as you do this. The goal of guided imagery is to help someone feel a sense of safety and calm within their bodies. But if you're walking someone through who is having somatic hallucinations, and you're asking them, what do you feel? That might lead to increased strength of their symptoms. Breathing exercises, always a go-to, always a exercise that I did with my clients when meeting them initially in treatment, because it's so helpful to just, first of all, give you some time and space between the urge and then actually using. Also helps the body calm down. Physiologically, you start to feel a little calmer, helps you think things through too when you're deep breathing. Body scanning, another technique. This is essentially where you guide somebody through scanning their body while they're experiencing a craving to help raise their insight into the connection again between what is my body experiencing and my urge to use. But again, if there's some somatic delusions or hallucinations, you want to exercise some caution in using a body scanning technique. Exercise and yoga, other helpful kind of get moving, kind of release endorphins, help the body calm down. Grounding techniques helps people feel a sense of stability where perhaps they feel unregulated or even some dissociative symptoms. If the individual is experiencing those, grounding can help them to feel rooted, to feel stable, to feel a sense of stability for them. My favorite was the tree grounding exercise. You have folks feel their feet on the floor, imagine their feet, their legs as the trunk of a tree, and the roots are kind of growing out of their feet and holding strong. Again, exercise caution with folks who are experiencing those body or somatic symptoms. Music. Music can be helpful. Music should be relaxing. I used to do an anger management group and we would talk about music and I would say, well, what are you listening to? And they're like, oh, heavy metal, grunge, because it just helps me feel my anger. And I would say, well, the goal is to calm you down. The goal is to feel opposite of that. You're just helping your body rehearse how to feel angry. So it's important if you're talking about music, how do you feel when you're listening to that music? What does your body feel when you're listening to that music? Behavioral techniques, role play. Great exercise to use, especially if you have a client who's struggling with assertiveness. They don't know what to do when the dealer calls. I would have clients whose dealer would come to the door and try to throw substances through her window. That's really, really hard to try to avoid. But sometimes we can do some exercises like role plays to help folks practice those refusal skills in the moment kind of situations that could happen. Activity scheduling. This is part of CBT in which we take a look at how much time are you spending in your day around substance use? How long are you thinking about it? How long are you taking to obtain it? How long are you taking to recover from it? So we take a look at, can we look to schedule an activity in this person's daily routine that helps to interrupt a pattern or interrupt a cycle of substance use? Coping cards, visual cues are very helpful, especially for this population that we're talking about today, because they may not be able to remember the coping technique that you taught them in session, an hour ago. So this is visually writing out, drawing, could really get creative, have the client draw coping cards and put them around their space, put them in their apartment, put them where that person maybe uses usually or is triggered for them. So for example, if I'm always using in my recliner, I'm going to work with my team member to draw a picture that says, remember to do 5 deep breaths. And I may stick it in my cup holder in my recliner because that's where I am typically using. Graded task assignments. These are just small steps toward maybe a larger goal. So if my paranoia has me so frozen that I don't even want to go outside of my house, graded task assignment would be, okay, let's first have you just open the front door and leave the front door open for 30 seconds. And we affirm that, we recognize their progress, and then we might step it up a bit. Well, let's leave the door open for, a minute, 5 minutes, and just working yourself up toward, more and more graded tasks. This helps people see that there's hope and that they can achieve things. Stimulus control. I want to get into each of these a little bit more because this is really helpful for folks who have impaired reality testing, who are experiencing psychosis, because again, some of the insight-oriented activities we might try to do, like taking a look at their beliefs and their self-talk, changing the environment is sometimes more effective than some of those insight-oriented interventions that we may try. So this stimulus control is a fancy way of like, how can we change the person's environment? How can we reduce the number of triggers in this person's life? The first way is Paraphernalia. Let me be clear. Do not remove drugs or substances that you're not sure what they are from the client's home. You don't want to get into a dangerous situation like that. Maybe you have. I'm saying collaborate with the client to say, hey, who could come in with you to your place and look through and help you remove paraphernalia? So it might be actually removing alcohol. It might be using one of those doTERRA medication dissolvable bags, or just getting rid of old pain prescriptions that maybe they still are holding on to. Of course, disposing of actual paraphernalia. You may have a support person hold their medications, or do the dispensing of their medications because maybe holding the pill bottle and opening that up is a trigger for them. Also, lock boxes or timed pill organizers can help. Timed pill organizers can help with medication adherence, which in turn, of course, can reduce mood or symptom-induced cravings. Changing the physical environment for folks. We have the good old-fashioned avoiding specific locations that are associated with use. I can't say enough about rearranging your living space and the difference that it can make in just changing your furniture. Some of you maybe get in the mood to do this maybe during your spring cleaning. Change artwork that's in the home. If you're able to, paint a wall, or paint your room, just something different to change it up, to get that pattern of use, break that cycle of I'm so used to when I sit in my recliner and I see, the picture of the bird that I have on my wall. I've now associated the bird picture with using. So I'm going to take that down. I'm going to move it or even just change it up. Or changing lighting. Lighting can be very triggering for people. Those clients who are living in like apartment buildings, residential settings, for them, they may want to think about keeping their door open for a moment or staying where others are in, like a common area, again, to reduce that isolation and to reduce those feelings of maybe paranoia, or change routines that are tied to use. Take a different route home, change the place where you usually get coffee, just changing up your usual routine. Again, interrupting that cycle and those patterns. Social triggers. This is the people in people, places, and things. Obviously, we want to have a conversation. Who in your life is using? Who is encouraging you to use? We might even work with them collaboratively on their phones or cell phones to take a look at who do you feel comfortable blocking? Let me show you how to do that. Can we put certain people on Do Not Disturb if they're not comfortable completely removing a contact from their phone? We want to increase the people in their life that are supportive of recovery and schedule structured social time during high risk periods. So through that, tracking patterns together, remember the T in earnest, through tracking patterns with your client, you may find that, gosh, every night around 6 o'clock seems to be, after dinner time when you're using. So how about you call your sponsor every night at that time? Or how about let's find a meeting. Let's find a meeting that you can go to during that high risk time when you're triggered to use. We then have time-based triggers. So this is again through tracking patterns, through that functional analysis. You find that it's the time of day that's triggering folks. Schedule activities. Going back to activity scheduling. Schedule activities for the person to do during predictable craving windows. If your client is triggered every night for some reason around 7 o'clock, have them watch Wheel of Fortune like I do. That brings me joy. Something similar. Doesn't have to be Wheel of Fortune. Setting reminders for folks to just stay healthy, setting reminders for them to eat, sleeping or medication reminders. You could even work with them, and everybody seems to have cell phones. So working with them with their cell phone to even set alarms to remember to do breathing, remember to do that grounding technique. Just setting timers in their phones to remind them when to engage in some of those more relaxation techniques. This next one, a big one. Digital and media triggers. I think this is probably a big one that not only our clients are experiencing, but we may be experiencing as well. Social media can be quite triggering. Plus, we don't know what is real, what's not real. It's a difficult world that we're in right now. So imagine experiencing psychosis during this time. So again, collaborate with your client, ask permission to say, hey, can we look through your Facebook account, see what kinds of things you follow, help them to unfollow those pages, and then on the other side of that, help them to follow healthy or positive pages or accounts on their social media. You may even be able to go through and block ads that pop up, for example, for alcohol on there. Ask folks, how much time are you spending on social media? How much time are you spending on the internet? Or when do you usually get on your phone? They might say all day. And that gives us some information to go off of. But especially limiting late night screen use, we hear this for all of us. It can interrupt our sleep, especially if that late night scrolling leads that person to substance use. Work with them to limit that, work with them to do some good sleep hygiene. But that was always a go-to that I always asked, especially my folks that were experiencing paranoia. How much time are you spending on social media? What are you looking at? TikTok, another big one that folks will spend hours on. And then internal cues. How do we help people who are triggered to use internally? Some things like headphones or white noise, especially if the voices increase the person's craving to use. Is there some way to kind of counteract that? Changing lighting or sensory input when paranoia or agitation escalates. Many of my clients would complain about my overhead fluorescent lighting. I'm somebody who likes a lot of light, but for some folks, that's very disturbing and it can be triggering for folks. So finding out, do we need to change the lighting in your space or move it around, for example? Having grounding objects. This is something folks can carry with them, have in their pockets. It might be a texture that is soothing to them. It might be somehow something that is scented, that when they're feeling that internal kind of urge to use, they just pull out of their pocket and maybe they sniff it and calm down. Fidget, there's tons of different kinds of fidgets. They're so popular now. My daughter comes home from school and she's asking for some kind of new thing that's out all the time. But they're squishy things essentially. So that, poppets, whatever it may be to help them interrupt that internal cue. And then there's the good old leave environments that intensify delusions or perceptual distortions for folks. Some people don't realize that they're in a triggering environment. So we first have to help them kind of see that connection, like we talked about earlier. And then once we're able to identify those patterns and those conditioned cues for folks, they'll be better able to know, oh, last time I went there, I was really, really triggered. Probably shouldn't go there, or I should probably go at a slow time, for example. All right, real quick, we're going to shift then to another strategy for helping folks manage cravings, and this is reducing risk. I just see in the chat a stress croissant. My daughter's teacher has like emotional support chicken nuggets in her room. There's all kinds of stuff out there. Yeah, I saw a squishy like stick of butter. There's so many things that can be very sensory helpful for folks. We talked a little bit about reduced risk earlier, looking at, is there a substance or something else that will fulfill the function of use for you? Is there something even to use that has a less risk potential? And depending on your team's philosophy, this is harm reduction. This is looking at, you say that you want to calm down. Again, what's the function? You say that you just want to calm your nerves, you want to calm down, and usually it's fentanyl that does that for you. Is there something else that maybe has a less overdose potential? And those conversations might feel uncomfortable for you, but it is a harm reduction strategy. Planning to use with someone or using those resources like Never Use Alone or Safe Spot. Make sure the client, their family, their friends, shelter employees, you name it, make sure they have access to Narcan. Wound care, taking a look at, hey, after, you said that you use intravenously, you use IV, what do you do after you use? Could you get some peroxide, some antiseptic wipes? Make sure you're covering that. Do you know what it would look like if your wound became infected? Reduced use, even if they are reducing the number of times they use, reducing it by one, reducing the actual amount that they're using can be another big step for folks to just reduce their use. And then we'll end here on creating useful, meaningful prevention plans that take into account the symptoms of psychosis. So think about your traditional relapse prevention plan, usually has what are your triggers? What are you going to do? Usually with the goal, whether it's stated or unstated, of abstinence. For folks experiencing psychosis, we want to consider some additional components to doing a relapse prevention plan with them. So we want to take a look at what is the client trying to protect or improve? What is important to your client? It might be something like, I want to feel safe. I want to stay in my housing. I want to keep my benefits. So remembering what is important to you. And then those early warning signs. Do you notice that your sleep starts to change, that you start to have certain nightmares, for example? Or do the voices change in intensity? And then what do those cravings mean to you? Essentially, what's the function of the substance for you? Maybe it's to feel calm. I want to quiet those voices. I want to make sense of what's happening to me. We also want to help them remember those high risk situations that we've worked with the client to identify. Maybe it's being alone too long, going back to kind of that stimulus control. If being alone for too long gets them in their head, gets them thinking, and then ultimately leads to their use, again, talk with them about keeping doors open, reaching out to someone to reduce that loneliness that's a high risk situation for them. Then, what helps? What has helped you in the past? Things like grounding, sensory tools, for example, movement, distraction. And then what are some ways that this individual can reduce risk for them? Delay use, you may work with them to say, what do you think is a reasonable time for you to delay your use? It might be 1 minute, it might be 30 minutes, just depends on your client. They may avoid mixing substances. They may agree to, as part of their relapse management, to use a fentanyl test strip, for example. And then who helps you stay safe? Is it staff? Is it somebody in your family? Is it, someone, a neighbor? Who helps you stay safe? The other thing that I like about this relapse management plan is what can others do? So if others suspect that you're using or that you're going to use, how do you prefer they approach you about that? Do you want them to approach you about that? What makes things worse that others could do? And then also, what if you use? Again, we're not planning for a goal of abstinence necessarily. It would be nice, but it may not happen. So if you use, what are you going to do right after? Who can you contact after you've used? And then how can we reduce harm in that situation? How can we reset the plan? Is there something that we need to take a look at changing as part of your relapse prevention plan? And then this last component is what's one small goal that you're willing to try? Well, I guess I could call somebody before I use when those voices get intense. One small thing that the person can try in that moment where they're triggered to try to prevent or reduce the risk associated with their use. All right. And just to wrap up, like I did go through that faster than I thought, but that leaves us some more time maybe. So wrapping up, putting a nice little bow on today's time with you all. Cravings for use, again, result of conditioning, along with changes that are actually happening in the brain. The brain is associating something with the effect of use. That's where we have to help folks interrupt, break that conditioning. Also, remember the experience of a craving. It involves emotions, thinking, physical feelings. Those triggers of cravings with those with severe mental illness may differ in nature as compared to those who do not have severe mental illness. And last but certainly not least, understanding the function of someone's use is important for planning effective interventions and relapse management or relapse prevention plan. And these are resources, and this is who I am. And with that, I'll end and turn it over to Lorna and Maria.
Great. Thank you, Amanda. That was wonderful information. I saw a lot of kudos in the chat with it. No questions that I saw so far. It's interesting. It's a lot here, and so much we overlook at times, like the small things that are so important. You're jogging my memory of a woman that had some complex substance use that I worked closely with on the last team. And she would explain to me that when she was trying to stay not in a not using space, when she had moved into a new apartment, and she would explain how when she would get on her hands and knees to try to find something small that was dropped, it would trigger her because she would think about the times that she'd be trying to find little rocks of cocaine. And it was just such a thing where I was just like, I would never have thought that. Like I would never, like the small things that you become associated and become so deep, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of good information here.
Yeah, that's why that stimulus control, looking at a person's environment, their daily routine, what could possibly be triggering for them? Because
Right.
again, sometimes we just don't know because has become so conditioned within the brain that we're not consciously saying, oh, I'm on my hands and knees looking for something I dropped. This reminds me of cocaine. It's not
Yeah.
always obvious to folks. So helping them is really important. Looking at, again, that functional analysis to take a look at patterns and things like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have time. We have Amanda here. If y'all been shy about questions or scenarios, and we can also use some of this time for that open mic if you wanted to get off topic. So this is where, uh, yeah, okay. Sharon, I had a container shaped like a light bulb with paper clips on my desk. I had a client ask me to remove it. Didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That
Um,
paraphernalia can be really, really, really triggering for folks.
Hmm.
yeah.
Amanda, where would you say the best resources for folks to delve more into the psychosis informed motivational interviewing and the earnest framework? I mean, I was looking through your references and could be one of those, but do you know, like, where I was trying to think of, because I
Some
don't
of
think
it,
it's Bill Miller's stuff, is it? Like,
I do have an article and it's motivational interviewing for psychosis.
hmm
I might have it actually. Let me see if I can
okay.
pull it up here
And if you
and
can't,
give
we can
you.
always include it after.
Yeah, yeah, I know I have it somewhere in my many files that I try to be organized. It might be buried
Great.
somewhere. But yeah, I can find that and definitely
Okay.
forward that on.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, we usually comment on, when talking to ACT teams about their covering the on-call and the crisis line, that a lot of times the calls coming in are moments of people in some level of distress. And it could be, I don't remember when the pay is sending my check. I don't know when you're coming, or I'm lonely, I'm bored. But sometimes it is craving related. And, trying to help staff who I will admit on call was my least favorite part of doing ACT work. Did not love on call, but if you can train staff to realize that oftentimes it's not a crisis, people are in some level of distress. And when it comes to cravings don't last long, and if you are just in the mindset of giving somebody 10 minutes of your time to kind of talk through and remind them of those very concrete coping cards, whatever you created with them, like that's pretty much what they need in the moment. So,
Mhm.
what is the average craving last? I think it's something like a minute or less. Like it's not long.
Right.
It may be according to substance.
Yeah, it's not long, but think about if I am triggered to use, if I have command hallucinations telling me to use, that craving maybe they're all the time. And that's one of the
Yeah,
slight
that's true. Right. The
differences.
source of it.
Yeah.
Good
I see.
point. Jacob said it can feel long.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure it feels like a lifetime. Stephen has a question in the chat. Operationally, how are these interventions dosed? For example, specific and longer duration visits, small incremental doses through the week. It is disposition driven, I would say, Stephen. It would depend. It depends on the client, depends on their environment. I know most of you are working with folks in the community, and that what we call in vivo practice is the best. If you're with an individual and if you're in Walmart, for example, and it's like Saturday morning and it's packed, and your client is comfortable enough to tell you, hey, this is like too much for me. I'm feeling really anxious. When I feel this way, I usually use. In that moment, certainly say, hey, why don't we try some breathing here for a moment? Let's step aside and, can you pull out your fidget cube and use that while we're shopping? So it really is whenever you can. Because with some folks who are in the midst of psychosis, that might be your only opportunity because maybe it's really hard to pin that person down. So whenever you can, use that opportunity to practice those skills again in their environment so that they're better able to use the skill uh, maybe when you're not there. That's my long roundabout answer there. Yeah, whenever you can.
I'm going to go to the
Maria, do you want to
sure.
do one of the Q&As or?
Sure. Well, Jacob Hackman had a question. What is the best way to implement this as a team approach, or are these interventions best done one-on-one?
I think it's important for everyone to be on the same page and continually reinforcing it. again, team approach. If and you know if it's possible, I think it's better done one-on-one, just so the client doesn't feel overwhelmed. If any of you are running like a substance use group, co-occurring groups, certainly use these interventions within the group setting, but it might just be that the opportunity is that real quick check-in. Maybe you go to check in on the client, do a home visit. They open the door and they're like, "Oh, not you again. I'm not meeting with you today." And you may, say, "Hey, is there anything urgent that you need from me? How are you doing?" And they might tell you, "Well, I used," and so that's that brief moment where you have them that you can use an intervention.
So it looks like Anders, who's also a peer, was asking if you trigger someone who's experiencing somatic symptoms through something such as guided imagery, and they don't want to continue the session, what do you recommend as the starting point for the next session?
If they don't want to continue session, first before ending that session, I would try to somehow get that person, make sure that I'm not sending someone off out of my office or out of our time together who is triggered, who is in that state of like hyper arousal. So I might switch to something different. If it was imagery that was triggering, I might switch to something more sensory. I might switch to maybe music, something that maybe we know through our work together helps calm them so that, again, we're not kind of sending them off. Next time you meet with them, I would definitely, I really appreciate your willingness to go through that exercise with me, acknowledging, affirming them going through that with you, because it can be really uncomfortable for some folks
Mhm.
to do that because they're just not used to it. So acknowledge it, appreciate it, and make sure the person knows that kind of they're in control. Whenever they feel uncomfortable, please let me know, and I appreciate you letting me know that last time.
Okay, another question from Nimish is how often do you recommend substance abuse groups for ACT? Like how often or types of groups they may be offering? And I think you're not currently with an ACT team right now. You're with the
Uh,
center. So I don't know if others want to share how, if it's common for your ACT to do Suboxone within your agency was the other part of the question, which may be more of a chat question.
Hmm.
yeah, I think we
Yes.
ran our substance use group. I think it was once a week, and then we noticed that increasing it to twice a week gave more people more opportunity. I think it just depends on, how many are on the ACT team and how many
Hmm.
have substance use disorders, probably most of them. Um, I think it's just kind of
Tailor
like a
it.
trial, try it, yeah, and
Uh,
see how that goes.
we've also had
Yeah,
clients kind of
go ahead.
do their group based on just how many people do they have in kind of early stages of change and how many people do
Hmm.
they have in later. Maybe they just have one relapse prevention group, but then they've got kind of, more of a early stages
Yeah.
group that's more focused on something that's a little more general, like healthy living or something like that. And then you kind of weave that in. You could also address smoking and,
Yeah.
nicotine. So were you going to say
Yeah, what
something
you
else?
call the
Yeah.
group is important
Yes.
because
Yeah.
I don't have a substance use problem. Like you all have the problem. I don't need to go to a group for that. But hey, I will go to a group that is like, adulting 101 or, budgeting, something like that might be more useful for me. And then you weave in the substance use, how it's connected. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
So Laura's
Yeah.
asking, how do you know a client would be safe to get off the phone when they call and state that they are triggered to use based on not being able to do a visual assessment on the client?
Let me read this over again to process. How do you know a
Okay.
client is safe to get off the phone when they call and state they're triggered to use based on not being able to do a visual assessment on the client? Oh, okay. So you're on the phone with the client. They're telling you, I'm triggered to use. How do you know when it's safe to get off the phone? It's so important to get to know your clients, spend a time with them in person talking about triggers and cues and cravings. observe them when you're out in the community with them so that you have an idea of that. But also the relationship is really important. Developing that strong therapeutic relationship of trust, that they feel comfortable talking to you about their use. I would say so long as you have provided them with adequate resources, they've told you, they can kind of recite back to you some safety resources, what they're going to do after. That kind of gives you a sense of, okay, they know something, a support to call, they know something that they can do. And they know I've reminded them of, Narcan, calling 911, don't use alone, and documenting that you informed them of all of those resources and safety planning too.
Going to say too, for the earlier question about Suboxone within the team or not, it's so much depends on your provider, right? And whether they are able to actually, if they've got that certification and they're, got the DEA registration, all of that. So it probably depends a lot on that, I would assume.
Mm-hmm.
It does.
Yeah.
The ACT team where I was director at the site. I wasn't the team leader, but I was the director at the site. We ironically we partnered with another local substance use treatment agency who did methadone and Suboxone, and we were actually in the same building. It was pretty neat. So we had open communication there. But yeah, I saw in the chat, unfortunately, some providers will not prescribe things like Suboxone, Vivitrol, methadone to folks who are not abstinent. And that can be frustrating because abstinence can be a hard, challenging thing to achieve in this population. Um, and we know the benefits of medications for opioid use disorder and how they're life-saving, so it can be frustrating, but it is very provider dependent, agency philosophy dependent as well.
We see a chat question from Yasi asking about any tips, tricks to starting up a substance abuse group, ways to get them interested, motivated to come. Of course, my first thought was you got to have some food there.
Food, yeah.
Food helps, and good food. So for me, one thing is be clear about who are you targeting. I think that stages of change is helpful because I see sometimes people launch the group and all of a sudden it becomes the group where they're like, well, anybody can come, even people who aren't using substances. And you start really diluting kind of what the focus will be. And for those who may be more working on not using further along, sometimes they get annoyed by hearing people talk so openly about their use. And then, like you mentioned, people who are too very early in their readiness to see this as a problem to work on, they're going to be very responsive to the naming and branding of the group altogether. So, if you have other thoughts on that.
Um, I think people want to come to a group where they feel like it's going to benefit them in some way. Why would I even want to go sit around with other people? Um, so like maybe keeping it, like Lorna said, very targeted to stage of change. And so, um, are you going to learn about, I don't know, job interview, nutrition? Sometimes groups like that with those very specific topics can get folks coming, but also your whole team has to be very excited about the group when they're talking about it with the clients too. And make sure that those conversations are ongoing and that the team is all on the same page about talking about the group and what it's going to be like and how it can be helpful, I think is another key.
Yeah. They're usually logistically helping people get to the group too. So you're trying to really time it well through the week. That makes sense. Sometimes too, an idea that we put forth is not everything has to be presented as the forever going group, presented as a workshop. We're going to do a workshop for 12 weeks. It's going to be talking about ways to kind of, build upon your strengths of trying to live a healthier life, like then it feels like contained, it's exciting, it's a course or a workshop.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a 2 hour group, hour and a
Right.
half. It might just be an hour, you know?
Hmm. All right. Nice set of questions you came out with out of nowhere. It's funny. I think everybody was just locked in listening to you because I was like, this Q&A box is so quiet, but they're all just holding on to them the whole time.
I'm gonna go with that. Yes.
Well, on this topic or on another topic, you have us for 8 more minutes.
I always like to hear, strategies, interventions that people have used that have been creative and really helpful, because maybe there's something I didn't even mention. And personally, I'm interested too.
Hmm.
Yeah, we're happy to if you do want to share something live, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you. So feel free to do that instead of typing in the chat. But I think it's a great question, Amanda. Just what are some, doesn't have to be what you presented, but more just generally what are people using? Okay, we've got one, hopefully. Here. Oops. Okay, Kim, just have to unmute yourself here.
Well, hello, thank you. Amanda, thanks so much for your presentation. And I joined it late, so I really wish looking forward to getting the written materials. Sort of related to the idea of a substance abuse group, we currently are having a problem. We've been successfully running, we call it our recovery group, for about 4 or 5 years now. Um, uh, but recently, they've all started using together. And so it's um, there's some of the people that we've asked to step back from group for the time being and are focusing on individuals. But uh, any suggestions? I mean, I know that this is always a risk in substance abuse treatment in any setting, but uh, especially since we have a group of clients who so desperately want connections and they want friendships. And
Hmm.
we want to encourage their friendships. We just don't want them using crack while they're doing it.
Yeah. That is a risk, but I think it's also an opportunity. Get the group together and talk about it. Hey, what, is it that you're seeking connection? What's everybody's kind of function of the use, and really talk about it. And it's almost, I'm thinking like family treatment, talking about the connections and the dynamic, and how is so and so triggering you, and using it as an opportunity. But that's tough. That's tough. I've seen that happen too. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts, please.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate you sharing that, Kim. It's not the first time we've heard that. It's can be really
I
challenging.
appreciate the idea of
Yeah.
focusing on the function of the, share that
Hmm.
with our specialist on the team.
Great. So I'm gonna turn it over to Anne here, who just raised her hand, and I will take you off here, Kim. Hi, Anne.
Howdy. I guess I don't have video. That's the
That's okay. We can
okay.
hear. Yeah,
Um,
no worries.
okay. I just wanted to mention because I when I was working on my doctorate, I came across I was looking at several different programs for helping people with SPMI for different aspects of their health. There was one that was really I really liked it called Dimensions Well Body Program through the University of Colorado, and it's like a 6 week kind of rolling program on like one week you talk about sleep, one week you'll talk about food, one week you talk about exercise, one week substance, and you don't require people to commit to it or anything. Like they can just show up. If they just want to show up one week, then they don't the next week. And I really liked that idea, and it seemed very appealing for being able to reach a lot of things. And they're very heavy on the MI. They've got some really good trainings for it. I've wanted to implement it, but I've never been able to. But just to plug that as a potential way that people could try to incorporate some of these things.
Yeah. Could you, Anne, type that in the chat so that we can see it and maybe jot it down for ourselves?
There's
Oh,
a link to the program right there.
Oh, perfect.
great.
Thanks. I was going to ask the same thing. Great. Thanks so much, Anne.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one last question, and it's a common one that comes up when we're talking about substance use, which is thoughts on contingency management for ACT, rewarding for harm reduction or for abstinence. I don't know if you have thoughts, Amanda, on this. I've had thoughts in the past that I'm open to constantly revisiting.
I am a bit biased on this one because through it's kind of another branch of Center for Evidence-Based Practices. It's our Substance Use Disorder Center of Excellence in Ohio. I've worked heavily on our contingency management training. We do training on it. We had a whole research brief that was written by our research team. I continue to learn more about contingency management. I am a big fan for contingency management, especially for folks who are not internally motivated yet. For folks who you're not seeing, that are not coming, they're not showing up, they're not home when you go there. It's not just rewarding negative drug screens. You can reinforce somebody going to their primary care physician, putting in a job application, just any kind of activity that shows that somebody's making progress toward a healthier lifestyle. The research behind it is robust, especially for stimulant use disorders. This is the first line intervention for those who are using cocaine, methamphetamine, you name it. So that's my biased opinion on contingency management. And it has been shown to be effective with folks with severe and persistent mental illness as well.
Yeah, it goes back to like, the old token economies in terms of behavioral shaping. I agree with what you're saying, and I think my challenge at times is the ethical implementation about where does the money come from? Because for me, sometimes I have seen it implemented with providers that they're using it in a way that feels very broad, and it's guaranteeing a billable contact that you then are able to get money from Medicaid, and it starts feeling like, so I think there's ethics around that I don't think fully gets sorted out in the field about the places in which you implement this and how do you do it in a way that maintains an ethical way of resourcing it.
It's an evidence-based practice, and there are 7 principles that you need to incorporate when you're putting together a program. Because, like you said, Lorna, you can step over the ethical line very quickly in a program like that. And there are guardrails that actually the Motivational Incentives Policy Group has come out with guardrails, they call them, to ensure folks are doing this ethically. Because some people are like, well, let's just start giving gift cards to people who come to their appointments. That's not contingency management.
Right.
There's so much more to it than that. So yes, when done correctly and ethically.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing what were the guidelines again? It was
The Motivational Incentives Policy Group.
incentives. I missed that, of course. Okay, great. Great. Well, thank you so much. Owen, Anders, thank you for adding to the chat this last little bit of recommendation here. Thanks again. Great comments and questions and feedback today. I did put an evaluation in the chat. Lorna and I take these very seriously. And in those, it's always great to say, hey, it would be great to have this particular topic in a future call. So feel free to use the form in that way, and I will send you a certificate of participation or a certificate of attendance after. And we hope that you'll come back and join us in a month on June 1st, where we will have Jacob Schoenberg and Jacob Hackman and potentially some other peer specialists talk about the role of the peer in acting. So in the meantime, have a great rest of your May, and may the 4th be with you.
Bye.
I should have opened with that. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.